The PS Plus games for August have leaked, and where are the PS5 Pro controllers? Cyberpunk 2077 is back in the news, we have an update on the Gran Turismo 7 beta, and don't call it a director's cut. Cyberpunk 2077 has had one hell of a journey since it came out last year. They've done tons of updates that kind of fix some stuff and breaks other stuff, but right now it's really in a spot where people who are on PS4 Pros and PS5s can get a good experience playing through the game. Now, I got it when it came out, and I actually enjoyed the story quite a bit. I thought it was kind of like a good open world GTA style game that needed a few more years in the oven, but at the end of the day, it was a good franchise starter, and really what made it not work out so well, I think, was the expectations that were set by CD Projekt RED. I know I and so many other gaming YouTubers have complained about this game because we're all just kind of sick of talking about it at this point because it's taken so long to patch it to get it to a playable point, but when I played it, I wasn't saying I'm done with this franchise, that was a waste of time. I was like, this is a good start to something that could turn into a really cool sequel down the line if CD Projekt gets their shit together. And once it showed up on the PlayStation Store last month, I was kind of curious on where people would come down on it, because I know a lot of people did end up returning it, but at the end of the day, most of the people who bought it when the game came out just hung on to it, even though they could get a refund. And it looks like people were actually excited to have Cyberpunk back because it was the best-selling PS4 game last month. Now, that's surprising in itself because it had such a weird launch, but it's even more surprising when you consider that it's only really playable on the PS4 Pro. Like, if you go on the PlayStation Store on a PS4, it says do not buy this if you have a launch PS4 or a PS4 Slim. Only get it if you have a PS5 or a PS4 Pro. But the fact that it sold so well means that people who have PS4s are still just saying screw it and buying the game just for that little bit of extra good performance. So when you look at where CD Projekt RED was when they released Cyberpunk 2077, they were basically at the top of the gaming industry. Everyone loved The Witcher 3. It's like one of the best-selling, most like well-liked games of all time. They announced a PS5 patch and upgrade for it that was supposed to look really good. And then the game came out and they kind of ruined their reputation, and it seemed like they couldn't come back. But now, knowing this, knowing how many people bought the game on PS4 when it came back to the store, it's crazy to consider that, yeah, I feel like CD Projekt might end up fine just a couple years down the line. I guess it's not that weird though, because when you look at Bethesda, they were putting out stuff that people really weren't into for a little bit. Like, they had Wolfenstein Youngblood, they had Rage 2, which seemed like it was going to be awesome, and then it was just an average open world game, and then they had Fallout 76, which, like, we don't even need to talk about how that game launched. But then you look at what they've got coming down the line, like Starfield, Elder Scrolls 6, we've got more Doom stuff coming, and people generally seem to like Bethesda again, and you know, it seemed like with Fallout they were basically dead. So, you know, it could get a little bit better for CD Projekt. I think it's just gonna take time, and it's gonna take some really good releases on their part. All right, so we all know last week's State of Play wasn't exactly what people wanted. We were all expecting God of War gameplay and more Horizon Forbidden West, and Sony specifically said when they announced that State of Play, we weren't gonna see it, and it was gonna be all about Deathloop. But one of the coolest games that was shown off during that State of Play was Lost Judgment. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the Yakuza series, but it's not because I don't like it or anything, it's because I've never actually played a Yakuza game, and that has to change sometime soon because they've been putting out so many games here, like a Dragon, which came out with the PS5, and then we got Judgment, which I think is getting a PS5 port very soon, and then of course, we have this new game, Lost Judgment. Now, the Judgment series is kind of interesting because it's a spin-off from the Yakuza series, and like a Dragon, I guess changed the entire series as a whole going forward, where it was an action-focused series all the way up until the 7th game when they decided to change the combat to turn-based. And then there was an announcement where they were like, yeah, that worked really well. We're gonna keep the mainline series as turn-based now with its combat, and then the Judgment series is going to be our action series going forward. But now, it looks like the Judgment series might be ending before it even gets off the ground, for a really kind of dumb and kind of understandable reason. So essentially what's happening is that the talent agency for the main actor in the game, Takuya Kimura, who I guess is one of the biggest actors in Japan, is fighting with Sega, who makes Judgment, because they want to port the game to PC. And the reason that's going to be a problem for the talent agency is because when you port games to PC, people can go into the game, they can get the character model, and then they can put it in Gary's mod or put a Speedo on it like they did with Mr. X in Resident Evil 2's remake. And that's why I said it's kind of understandable why they would maybe not want this character to end up on Steam. And just to be clear, it's not like this guy is just voice acting in the game. They used his likeness, and it's like he's acting in a movie, because I don't know if you saw the trailer for this game. It looked like real life at a certain point. I thought they were doing one of those live action trailers that like bled into gameplay or something like that. And then I was like, whoa, that is a video game guy. That is not a real human being. So that's where I'm like coming down on the middle. I'm like, I get it, but then you got to see how big this game is, A, and B, you got to look at it like the Streisand effect, where now everyone knows they don't want this guy to be messed around with in Gary's mod on PC. So if the game does come out on PC, that's the first thing you're going to see online. Like, people on Twitter are going to get viral tweets over putting this dude in a Speedo or a bikini or something like that. So I feel like they created a problem that was not necessarily going to be there. There's a whole backstory here that I don't really care to know because, as you guys know, I haven't played a Judgment game or a Yakuza game ever, but the long story short here is that if this game does eventually come to PC, we're not going to see more Judgment games in the future, which again is a problem because there's a lot of people who really like the action-focused Yakuza games that aren't going to get action-focused Yakuza games because the Judgment series is canceled. But the silver lining is that I learned on Twitter that the stories in these games are episodic. There's no like overarching narrative between Judgment and Lost Judgment, so this game won't end on a cliffhanger or anything like that. Presumably. I don't know. It might. Wouldn't that suck if they ended on a cliffhanger where it's like you think the main character's dead and then they just never answer the question? I don't know. I'm not going to play it, so we'll never find out. We're about halfway through July, so you know what that means. We know what games are coming in August on PS Plus. This month, instead of a random guy online leaking it to us, Sony leaked it themselves during their State of Play, which happened last week. The headlining PS Plus game we're getting this month is called Hunter's Arena. Now, this one's interesting because unlike some of the other games we've gotten over the past few months, this one's actually been on Steam for over a year in early access. It has mixed reviews at this point, which isn't great, but the reason I think this is showing up on PS Plus is that it's a battle royale game, so you obviously need a big player base to make it actually work right, and the best way to make that happen on PlayStation right now is to give it away for free on PS Plus. If you ask me, it looks pretty bog standard. It's a third-person action game, it's a battle royale, it's set in a fantasy universe. The combat looks okay, the animations are a little janky, but if you're looking for a new multiplayer game to try out with your friends for a weekend, I feel like this might be one to download. I don't want to call it a bad game because I haven't played it yet, but some of the best times I've had with my friends recently playing multiplayer games is with ones that had a lot of jank to them, where there was glitches happening and stuff was freaking out in ways that it wasn't supposed to. A recent one was Hood, Outlaws and Legends, I'm pretty sure is what it was called. It was like a Robin Hood game where you had to like rob a safe from a castle and take it to a winch and then like move it up this rope, but nothing really worked right in it. You would get assassinated all the time, and we had a lot of fun with it for like 4 hours and then we were done. But that seems like this kind of game and it's free, so maybe try it out. But yeah, this is the August PS Plus game, so if you want to check it out, make sure you download it between August 3rd and September 6th. And also, it might get a patch or something down the line that makes it better, so even if it isn't great at launch, you should still add it to your account. I was really excited to see Deathloop during the State of Play last week because it looks like Dishonored mixed with Wolfenstein, and now you can kind of see why Arcane helped out Machine Games on Wolfenstein Youngblood, even though that game wasn't too great. But the other thing I was super stoked to see was a release date for the director's cut of Death Stranding. Now, I played that game last year and I absolutely loved it. If you played a Hideo Kojima game before, like Metal Gear Solid, any of them, all the way up through 4 or even 5, you kind of knew what you were getting with it, a big open world game with really long cutscenes that are like movie quality, and it's just maybe a little bit too long with some esoteric gameplay that you'll never really feel like you got the hang of. It's basically like exactly what I wanted from a new Hideo Kojima game. But my biggest criticism with it is that I didn't really love the combat. There were guns and stuff you could use in the game, but it was like you needed multiple versions of a gun you really liked. It wasn't like you could just have one machine gun, for example, that you could reload constantly. It was like it had 50 bullets in it, and once it was gone, you just drop it on the ground or you hang on to the empty one to refill at one of the like underground bunkers that are checkpoints in the game. And I didn't really like that. So I was really excited to see in the trailer for the director's cut that the one thing it seems like they're addressing is the combat. There's new melee stuff, there's new weapons being added to the game, there's just overall more boss and combat encounters being added to the open world, which to be fair is exactly what it needed. But the most interesting thing about all of this is the fact that Sony is calling it a director's cut, because when this was announced at E3, people were like, why are they calling it a director's cut? It's very clear that this 50-hour game was already the director's cut of Hideo Kojima's vision because it's so damn long. It's like, what the hell is the guy gonna add that Sony wanted to take out for the original launch? And it seems like this is all Sony's fault because Hideo Kojima tweeted out that he doesn't understand either why it's being called a director's cut. He gave us this weird, like, broken English explanation of what a director's cut is supposed to be when it comes to movies, and then he said, yeah, this isn't a director's cut, it's just like an update where we are adding new content to the game because we want to re-release it on PS5. You know, it's not like I'm adding story beats or anything like that that are going to radically shift stuff that you already saw in the game. And I definitely see where he's coming from, because when you look at movies like Justice League, when you have the original theatrical release and then Zack Snyder's like 6-hour epic or whatever it ended up being, those are two completely different things. And And that happened with most of his movies. If you look at Sucker Punch, you look at Dawn of the Dead, all of his director's cuts make big changes to the product we saw initially. And it looks like these are just updates that we're getting in Death Stranding. So I'm kind of on Hideo Kojima's side here. But on Sony's end, I can definitely see why they're using this director's cut moniker. Like, we've seen them trying to make themselves a boutique brand. They're charging a lot for the PS5. They're going with this crazy artsy design for the actual console. They changed their Sony Computer Entertainment Presents banner to like that new PlayStation Studios intro that's more reminiscent of what you see before The Mandalorian or, you know, Loki from the Marvel banner and stuff like that. It's obvious they're trying to make the PlayStation name more of a boutique brand. So when they're taking these games like Death Stranding or Ghost of Tsushima and they're adding a little bit of content to them and repackaging them for PS5, calling it a director's cut kind of just feeds into that whole look that they've been trying to go for the past year. But as someone who's a huge movie fan, it is kind of weird to me because when you look at the gaming world versus the movie world, when you look at a movie, you're like, oh, I know who the director is on pretty much everything out there, unless it's a super low budget horror movie. But when you look at games, there are very few directors that people really know. You've got Ken Levine, you've got Hideo Kojima, you've got Neil Druckmann, you know, these are big names, but beyond that, there's a few more that I'm missing, but there's not really like an indie game where you're like, oh yeah, it's directed by this guy. It's more the studio that you pay attention to when it comes to video games. But there's no reason for us to really assume that Sony's going to keep using this director's cut name for every re-release they do on the PS5, because right now we only have two, and it looks like the Bloodborne port that we're going to get down the line is going to be called the Hunter's Edition, not the director's cut. So we just kind of have to wait and see. But yeah, it was just an interesting thing to see Sony be like, yes, this is the director's cut of Death Stranding, and then have the director a couple days later be like, what the hell are you talking about? This isn't my director's cut. This is just a re-release of the game with more content. So feeding into this idea of Sony trying to become a more premium brand, one thing I really think they're missing is a pro controller. Xbox has had two versions of theirs at this point, and they're largely pretty good. The one complaint a lot of people have is that the version 2 has the share button right where it's supposed to be, but it doesn't actually work like a share button. I've had both versions of these controllers and they both have the exact same issue, which is when you pull them out of the box, they feel great, and then you use them for like 6 months and they start to fall apart. The rubber came off of my Gears 4 edition, and then when I had the second Xbox Elite controller, it felt amazing, and then the like little switch to make the trigger pulls shorter fell off. It snapped actually, and now when I go to flip it, it actually cut my finger once, so I stopped using it. The magnets on the little switches you can install on the back of the controller are way weaker on that second one, and they get weaker over time, and the same goes for the thumbsticks. Like at the beginning, it felt like it was on there super tight, and now it feels like it'll slip off if I push the left stick too hard, which I don't know if you guys know this, that's how you move in most games. So it's super annoying when I'm playing Crucible and Destiny or something like that, and I push the left stick forward and then the little stick cap like flies off. I don't want that happening, especially on a controller that costs like $50 less than an Xbox Series S, you know? So basically what I'm saying is Microsoft is getting lazy with these controllers because they really have no reason not to be. We've talked about custom DualSenses you can buy on Amazon, which are around the same price as the Xbox Elite controllers, but they don't really add all that much functionality. They have weird art pictures on them, and they also have these weird textures on the back, but other than that, they don't add all that much. And I honestly don't think it would be that hard for Sony to come up with a controller that people would want to buy. There's some really simple additions you could add to the DualSense that make it that much better. Starting with better battery life, if you put a battery that was 2 times the size of the one you have in the DualSense currently, I feel like a lot of people would spring for that immediately and not even listen to what else they were going to add. They could also add stuff like wireless charging or those back paddles that they had on the DualShock 4 at the end and that they have on the Xbox Elite controller, but none of the DualSenses that we can get now have them. And most importantly, they could have those magnetic removable sticks that make them taller or have more grip, but they can make sure the magnets don't degrade over time like they do on the Xbox side. And then finally, they could take a page out of Microsoft's book and one-up them and just re-release this controller over and over again every time they have a new first-party game. Xbox was really good about making Elite controllers for Gears of War 4 specifically, and then they never did it again for any other game, which was absolutely bizarre. But yeah, thankfully with Sony trying to be more premium now, this doesn't feel too far off. It kind of feels like when rather than if, which last generation, it definitely felt like if. But yeah, guys, that's all the PlayStation news I have for you today. Again, make sure you let me know what you think of all of it down in the comments below. And remember, if you want to stay PS ready, subscribe and set your notifications to all. As always, guys, my name is Jimmy Champagne, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.